They told me to ask my daughter for help. My own son had just made partner at his firm, a corner office and a bonus check bigger than my old mortgage, and his mother told me to leave him alone and call the nurse instead. That's the kind of thing you don't say back to. You just sit there and let it settle into your bones like cold well water. I'm 63 years old, and I didn't say a word. But before I tell you the rest of this, I need you to understand something. This isn't really a story about money. It's a story about who still shows up once you've got nothing left to give them. Let me back up first. I live in a rented duplex off Route 9 outside Dayton, Ohio. Vinyl siding, a carport instead of a garage. The kind of place you tell yourself is temporary right up until it's been 15 years. I keep meaning to fix the screen door. Never do. It was a Thursday night in early June, hot for that time of year, and I was sitting at the kitchen table sorting through bills I already knew I couldn't cover. A shut-off notice from the gas company. A letter from my cardiologist's office that I hadn't opened yet, because I already had a bad feeling about what was in it. My wife Diane's phone buzzed on the counter, and I watched her face light up before she even looked at the screen. There it is, I thought. The only smile that woman still has, and it isn't for me. Marcus, honey, she near about sang it into the phone. Tell me everything. I set my coffee down. Is that Marcus? Let me say hey. She didn't even glance my way. Just turned her whole body, like I was a draft coming through a window she needed shut, and walked into the living room. Partner. My son had made partner at his law firm. I sat there and listened to my wife of 33 years talk to our boy like he'd just found a cure for something, instead of gotten a title bump and a bigger parking spot. I'm not saying that bitter. I'm saying it because it's true, and because you need to know what normal looked like in my house before I tell you what happened next. She hung up eventually, still glowing, walked back into the kitchen, and the smile dropped clean off her face the second she looked at me, like she'd taken off a mask she only wears for one person. He's doing so well, Frank, she said. That's good, I told her. And I meant it. Whatever had gone wrong between me and that boy over the years, I never once wished him bad. Diane didn't say anything else. She slid the gas bill across the table at me, didn't ask how I was feeling. Didn't ask about the way I'd been getting winded just walking to the mailbox for the better part of a month, which I'd been blaming on the humidity. Fix this before they cut it off again, she said. Again. Like it was a pattern. Like I was the pattern. Now, here's the part where I'm supposed to make myself sound better than I am. And I'm not going to do that, because the truth matters more than my pride does at this point in my life. 9 years ago, I wasn't some fool who blew the family savings at a riverboat casino. I ran a small HVAC business, 3 trucks, a handful of good guys who worked for me. Nothing huge, but steady, and I was proud of it. Then one of my technicians, a kid I'd vouched for personally, botched an install on a commercial job and started a fire that took out half a strip mall. My insurance fought the claim for 2 years and then dropped me anyway, on a technicality buried in the fine print. The lawsuits ate everything. The trucks, the tools, the business, gone. Banks pulled every line of credit I had. My partner walked. And Diane never once asked if I was all right. She asked how I was going to fix it. That was 9 years ago. I've worked the loading dock at a auto parts warehouse off I-75 ever since. 5, sometimes 6 days a week, coming home smelling like cardboard and machine oil at 54 years old, and then 55, and now 63. Somewhere in there my son turned 22 and decided his whole young adult life had been ruined because his father couldn't cover his law school application fees. He's never let that go. Not once, not even after I explained what happened. In his mind, I gambled and lost, and he paid the price. Maybe he needed a villain, and I was standing right there in the shape of one. My daughter's different. Rosa's 29, works as a home health aide over in Kettering, driving from one elderly patient's house to the next in a car with 190,000 miles on it. She was 20 when the lawsuits hit. Old enough to remember what we had before. Old enough to watch me try to rebuild something out of nothing instead of just mourning what was lost. She came by, 2 nights after that phone call with Marcus, carrying a container of soup, chicken, and rice, my mother's recipe, heavy on the paprika, the way I like it. Didn't say one word about money, or bills, or Marcus's promotion. Just set the pot down, kissed the top of my head, and said, "You still winded like that, old man." "Just the heat," I told her. "Uh-huh." She never believed me, never once. "You're seeing Dr. Alvarez, Friday. Don't fight me on it." I didn't fight her on it. Wasn't much point. She got her stubbornness from somewhere, and I had a suspicion it was me. Dr. Alvarez wasn't smiling when she came back into the exam room. She set the folder down like it weighed 40 pounds. "Frank, I'm not going to dress this up. The blockage in your left anterior descending artery, you need bypass surgery, and soon. Weeks, not months." There it is, I thought. The other shoe. "Okay," I said, because what else do you say? Then the man from billing came in, a nervous-looking guy named Doug, and told me my insurance had a coverage gap for the specific cardiac unit doctor Alvarez wanted, and that I'd need a deposit before they'd schedule the operating room. "How much?" I asked. $2,800, Doug said. "I can look into a payment plan, but the deposit's non-negotiable for scheduling. You want to know something? I used to clear that in a good 2 weeks before the fire took the business. Now, I sat in my truck in that hospital parking lot, a '08 Ford with a check engine light that never went off, and I did the math 6 different ways, and it came out the same every time. I didn't have it. My credit was still wrecked from the lawsuits. Not a bank in Montgomery County would touch me. $2,800, I thought. And I've got a son who just made partner at a firm that bills $400 an hour. I told myself I wouldn't call him. Told myself that for 2 whole days. Then I called him anyway, because that's what a father does. You swallow what's left of your pride, and you call your son, and you hope, God, you hope, he's still in there somewhere underneath all that success. He picked up on the fourth ring, and I could hear it right away. Music, glasses clinking, somebody laughing too loud. "Dad? Hey, can this wait? We're out celebrating the Kowalski settlement. Marcus, I need to talk to you about something serious." A pause, muffled, like he'd covered the phone. Then, "All right, go." I told him everything. The blockage, the surgery, the coverage gap, the $2,800 I needed by Monday or they wouldn't put me on the schedule. Silence, on the line. Long enough that for one stupid second I let myself think, maybe. "Dad." His voice went flat, cold. "I just spent 9 years digging myself out of the hole your business going under put this family in. Do you have any idea how hard I worked to get where I am? And now you want me to hand over money for what? More bad luck? Marcus, this isn't about the business. This is my heart. You always say that. Ask the hospital about financial assistance. That's what it's for." A pause, and then quieter, meaner. "I've got partners now, Dad. A reputation. I can't keep bailing out your mess." The line went dead. Just like that. My son hung up on me while I sat in a hospital parking lot with a bad heart, so he could get back to his champagne. I called Diane next, asked if she'd talk to him, soften him up. "Don't you dare ruin this for him," she snapped. "He worked hard to get away from all of this, from your failures. Rosa's got a stable job, doesn't she? Ask her. Rosa's a home health aide, Diane. She makes $15 an hour. Ask Rachel, then," she said. Meaning Rosa. "After 29 years, my wife still got our daughter's name wrong when she was too busy defending our son to think straight." I hung up, sat in that parking lot a long, long time. Didn't cry. I was past crying by then. Just sat there thinking about how a man works his whole life trying to give his family everything and ends up alone in a Ford with a bad heart, doing math that never comes out right. I met Rosa at a diner off Wilmington Pike 2 days later, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a waitress who calls everybody sweetheart. I hadn't planned on telling her. I was going to smile, eat my meatloaf, let her think everything was fine. She knew before I said a word. She always knows. "Dad," she set her fork down, "tell me right now." So I told her, and I want you to understand I was ashamed. Ashamed to be sitting across from my 29-year-old daughter, a home health aide who couldn't have more than a couple $1,000s saved, about to need money her own brother had turned down without blinking. I didn't even get all the words out before she reached into her bag and set an envelope on the table. Then she turned her phone around so I could see the screen. A payday loan app. Approved. $1,200. "Dad, stop talking." Her eyes were wet, but her voice wasn't shaking at all. There's 1,600 cash in there. I sold my grandmother's ring this morning. Rosa. My throat closed right up. That was Mom's mother's ring. Rings can be replaced, Dad. She grabbed my hand hard, the way you grab something you're not letting go of. You can't. I'm picking up extra shifts to cover the loan payments. It's fine. I sat in that booth and wept in front of a waitress named Donna and half the lunch crowd at a diner off Wilmington Pike, and my daughter, the one who didn't have a corner office, the one nobody ever bragged about on the phone, held my hand across a Formica table and told me I was going to be all right. She's the only one who's ever really seen me, I thought. The only one who ever did. I had no idea, sitting in that diner, how much that moment was about to matter. I had no idea what was still sitting out there waiting for me, tangled up in a lawsuit I'd stopped checking on years ago. But that's the next part of the story. Stay with me here. A letter showed up at my daughter's apartment while I was still healing from a surgery I could barely afford, and it was worth more than every dollar my son ever refused me. I want you to sit with that for a second, because I did. I sat with it for 4 days before I told a single living soul. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let me take you back to the morning of the surgery first, because you need to understand what it cost me to get to that letter. They wheeled me into pre-op at 5:30 in the morning on a Tuesday in late June, and the last thing I remember before the anesthesia took me under was Rosa's face right up close to mine, her hand squeezing my fingers. "You're going to be fine, old man," she said. "I already told the nurses you're too stubborn to die on them. They said that's a good sign." Where'd she learn to be this brave? I thought. 29 years old and steadier than I've been in my whole life. Then the lights went out. I woke up 9 hours later with a tube down my throat and a pain in my chest like somebody'd parked a truck on it. Dr. Alvarez came by that evening, still in her scrubs, leaned down close so I could hear her over the monitors. "We got a good result, Frank. Triple bypass. Clean. You did good." I didn't cry. Didn't have the energy. I just laid there thinking about my mother-in-law's ring sitting on some pawn shop shelf with a different family's name on the receipt now. My daughter bought me this. Not the hospital. Not the insurance company. My daughter bought me this with a $1,200 loan and a ring she'd never get back. I'm going to make this right, I told myself. However long it takes. I don't care if I'm 70, 80 years old. I'm going to make this right. I had no idea how soon that promise was going to come due. I spent the next 2 weeks recovering on Rosa's pull-out couch, because my own house was empty most days, and Diane hadn't so much as texted to ask how the surgery went. I wasn't about to lay up alone in a quiet duplex listening to my own heartbeat. Rosa's apartment was small, 1 bedroom near her clinic, the kind of place where you can hear your upstairs neighbor's washing machine through the ceiling. She'd taped her extra shift schedule to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a stethoscope, right next to a photo of the two of us from some county fair years back. I looked at that schedule every single morning. Every one. She's out there right now, I thought, driving to some stranger's house at 6 in the morning to help them bathe because she sold her grandmother's ring for me. And Marcus is billing $400 an hour to argue about a shopping center's parking lot easement. That thought sat in my chest heavier than the surgical scar. She'd come home every evening still in her scrubs, smelling like hand sanitizer, and she'd check my incision, heat up something simple, sit with me, and watch whatever true crime show was on. Never once complained. Never once brought up the ring. Never once asked when I'd pay her back. That's the difference, I thought, watching her fall asleep sitting up in a kitchen chair one night, still in her work clothes. Marcus gives when there's something in it for him. Rosa gives because it never once occurs to her not to. It's just love to her, plain as that. It was a Wednesday, 19 days after the surgery, when the mail carrier knocked instead of just leaving it in the box. Rosa was at work. I answered the door, still moving slow, still tender across the sternum. "Got something certified here. Need a signature." 2 letters, actually. One from an office I didn't recognize right off, Halbrook and Weiss LLP, and one with a return address I knew instantly, because I'd been getting mail from them for the better part of 9 years. United States Bankruptcy Court, Southern District of Ohio. Here we go, I thought. Another update on that debt insurance case. Another 6 months of nothing. I almost set it on the counter, unopened. Something made me sit down at Rose's little kitchen table instead. I read it twice, then a third time, slower, because I didn't trust my own eyes. Class action settlement. Distribution order. Approved. Turned out the insurance company that dropped me all those years ago, the one that fought my claim on a technicality and let the lawsuits eat my business alive, had been sued by a few hundred other small contractors they'd done the exact same thing to. A class action I didn't even remember signing on to, filed by some attorney years back who'd found my name buried in old court records. The case had crawled through appeals for the better part of a decade, and it had finally settled. My share, $340,000. Then I opened the second letter, from Halbrook and Weiss. Turned out that wasn't even the whole of it. The strip mall that burned all those years back had been sitting on land the county had been quietly trying to buy up for a new interchange project. My old insurance company, as part of the settlement, was also releasing a subrogation claim they'd been sitting on against the property itself, a claim that, once dropped, cleared the way for a payout tied to the original fire damages I'd never seen a dime of. Add another $60,000. I sat there very, very still. $400,000, I thought, and 3 weeks ago I was crying in a diner because I couldn't scrape together $2,800. I looked up, and my eyes landed right on that shift schedule taped to the fridge, her handwriting in the corner. Home visits X'd, shift 6, A.M., because she'd rearranged her whole week to cover a loan payment made for me. She's out there right now, I thought, driving some stranger to a dialysis appointment, and I'm sitting here holding $400,000. That's the moment something in me went quiet and clear. I didn't call Diane. I didn't call Marcus. I want you to remember that, because it matters for what comes later. I never hid this money from anybody. I just didn't see one single reason to tell people who'd already told me, in their own words, that my problems weren't their problems. I picked up the phone and called somebody else instead. Gary Feldman, my old accountant from back before the fire, one of the only professionals who'd stuck around, mostly because I'd always paid him what little I could, on time, every time. Frank, good Lord, how are you feeling? Rosa said the surgery went. Gary, I need you to pull some paperwork for me today, if you can. Something in my voice told him this wasn't a check-in call. I told him everything, the settlement, the number. Long pause on the line. Frank, 400,000. That changes everything. I know it does. I looked at that shift schedule one more time. That's exactly why I need you to pull something else first. You remember that document Diane had drawn up about 4 years back? Gary went quiet. The debt indemnification agreement, I said. The one Marcus pushed for. I remember it well, Gary said slowly. Frank, I told Diane at the time I didn't love the shape of it, but she was insistent, and it was her right to protect herself given how deep the lawsuit debt went. You want me to pull the original? I want you to pull it and tell me exactly what it says. Word for word. Don't leave anything out. Because if I remembered that document right, Diane hadn't just protected herself from my debts. She'd signed away every claim to anything connected to that old business, good or bad, forever. Gary called back 3 hours later, papers shuffling on his end. Frank, I'm going to read you the operative language. Diane Whitfield hereby waives, releases, and forever discharges any and all present or future marital claim, interest or right, legal or equitable, in and to any asset, judgment, settlement, or recovery arising from or connected to the business known as Whitfield Heating and Cooling, its liabilities, litigation, or any proceeding related thereto, regardless of cause or timing of recovery. Regardless of cause or timing, I repeated slow. Gary, does that mean what I think it means? It means exactly what we drew up, Frank. 4 years ago, Diane wanted the house and her retirement account protected in case that old lawsuit debt ever came back around and tried to attach to marital property. So she partitioned it. She kept the house and her accounts as her sole separate property, and in exchange you took 100% of the business liability and anything tied to it as yours alone, notarized, binding the day it was signed. Whatever comes out of that old case now, good or bad, $300 or $300,000, she signed away any legal claim to it. Marcus was the one who pushed her into it, wasn't he? He set the whole meeting up, Gary said. Told her it was smart. Told her it'd protect her if the lawsuit debt ever came looking for marital assets. I almost laughed, except nothing about it felt funny. Son of a gun sure was smart, all right. Just not in the direction he thought. I sat there at Rose's kitchen table with the afternoon light coming through those thin blinds, and for the first time in 9 years, I felt something in my chest that wasn't shame and wasn't grief. It was clarity. Gary, I want to move on the settlement disbursement. Quiet. I don't want a single soul outside this call knowing until it's done. Not even Diane? Especially not Diane. Or Marcus. I looked at that fridge one more time. Draw up whatever needs drawing up. I want an irrevocable trust set up alongside it. In Rosa's name. All of it. Gary didn't say anything for a second. All of it, Frank? The whole 400,000? Every dime after my medical debt gets cleared. She sold her grandmother's ring for me, Gary. She took out a payday loan at some ungodly interest rate so I could have surgery. She's been picking up 6 a.m. shifts for 3 weeks straight just to cover the payments. Meanwhile, my son told me to ask the hospital for financial assistance, and my wife told me not to ruin his celebration. So no, I'm not splitting this down the middle for the sake of looking fair. Fair already happened, Gary. Fair happened in a diner off Wilmington Pike 3 weeks ago, and only one of my children showed up for it. I hear you, Frank. I'll have paperwork ready by Monday. One more thing. Don't put my name on the deed for the house I'm buying her, either. Trust owns it outright. I don't want one piece of this anybody can argue about later. I want it airtight. Airtight, Gary said. Understood. I hung up and sat there a long while in that quiet apartment, listening to the window unit hum, looking at that little schedule stuck to the fridge with a stethoscope magnet. They're going to find out eventually, I thought. And when they do, they're not going to come here asking how I'm healing. They're going to come here asking about money. That's just who they've become. Maybe who they always were. I wasn't wrong about that. See, I figured Marcus and Diane would show up once they heard about the settlement. They didn't know a thing about it yet when they turned up at Rose's door 9 days later. They came because Marcus was drowning in trouble of his own making, and he needed money so bad he was willing to walk right into the one place he'd sworn he'd never set foot again, his broke, embarrassing father's temporary bedroom on his sister's pull-out couch. He had no idea what was waiting for him there. Neither did I know, back then, that I'd already been sitting on the thing that would end this for good, 5 years before he ever came knocking. 9 days. That's how long I had between hanging up with Gary and hearing that first hard knock on Rosa's door. 9 days to get my paperwork in order, sign what needed signing, and sit with the strangest feeling I'd had in a decade, patience. That didn't hurt one bit. I want to tell you I spent those 9 days plotting some big speech. I didn't. Mostly I healed. Walked a little farther every morning. Sat on Rosa's balcony in the evenings, watched the sun go down over the parking lot, and thought about a fire that had finally, after 9 years, stopped costing me anything. Then that Thursday evening came, and somebody pounded on the door hard enough to rattle it in the frame. Dad, open up, I know you're in there. Marcus's voice. Loud, frayed at the edges in a way I'd never heard from him. Not the smug courtroom Marcus from Perry's. Something else was under it now. Rosa got there before I did, still in her scrubs, and pulled the door open with a look I recognized, the same one she probably used on difficult patients' families. You want to explain why you're pounding on my door like it's a warrant? Marcus pushed past her without answering, Diane right behind him. Picture it. My son, 32 years old, tie loosened, sweat on his collar, even with the AC running. My wife behind him, arms crossed, jaw set hard. Neither one of them looked at me and asked how I was healing. Not one word about the surgery. Not one word about the scar still tender under my shirt. Dad. Marcus's voice cracked, just slightly, right in the middle. We need to talk. Now, there it is, I thought. Not how are you feeling? Not I'm sorry I hung up on you in a hospital parking lot. Straight to business. Same as always. Sit down, Marcus, I said. You look like you're about to need a cardiologist yourself. He didn't sit. He paced. I was looking through the federal docket today. That old fire lawsuit, the one from the strip mall. It's settled, Dad. I saw your name on the distribution list. $400,000. You knew about this, and you didn't call me? Diane's mouth fell open. 400? Frank, is that true? So that's how they found out, I thought. Not from me. From a public docket. Almost funny, in a sick sort of way. It's true, I said, calm as I could manage. Cleared 11 days ago. 11 days? Marcus's voice climbed. You've had this for 11 days and didn't call your own son? I looked at him a long moment before answering. Last time I called you, Marcus, you were celebrating a settlement while I sat in a hospital parking lot trying to figure out how to pay for open-heart surgery. You told me it wasn't your problem. So no, I didn't feel a burning need to call the second something good happened for once. That should have been the moment he softened. It wasn't. You hid this from us, Marcus said, finger jabbing toward me like it would make his words truer. You knew that case was close to settling. You let us think you were broke this whole time. Mom's driving a 9-year-old Buick, Dad, while you sat on a fortune, just waiting to hand it all to your favorite kid. He actually believes that, I thought, rewriting the whole thing in real time, right in front of me, and believing every word coming out of his own mouth. Marcus, I said, quieter, which somehow made the room go quieter too. I didn't know that case had settled until 19 days ago. I found out sitting on your sister's pull-out couch, recovering from a surgery she paid for. You want to talk about hiding things? I didn't hide a fortune from this family. I hid the fact that I was scared for 9 straight years, because every time I tried to talk about it, your mother told me to fix the bill and you told me I ruined your 20s. Diane stepped in, arms still crossed, chin up. Don't you dare stand there and play the victim, Frank. I stood by you for 33 years, while you dragged this family through your business failures. That money belongs to this family. You're being vindictive. You're being cruel. You're being stingy. You're being stingy, Dad, Marcus said, and it's disgusting. Stingy. I almost laughed out loud at that one. A man who wouldn't spare his father $2,800 for heart surgery, calling him stingy over $400,000. We're not asking anymore, Marcus said, and here's where his voice really shifted, dropped low and mean, the voice of a man who thought he was about to win. Mom's filing for divorce tomorrow. Financial abandonment, the works. My firm's already drafting a motion to freeze every account tied to that settlement until a court sorts out an equitable split. You hid marital assets, Dad. That's not gray area. That's fraud. He slammed his hand flat on Rosa's kitchen table, the same table where weeks earlier she'd slid an envelope of cash across without a second thought. You'll be tied up in litigation so long there won't be a cent left by the time we're done. I glanced at Rosa's face. That's my daughter's kitchen table, I thought, and he just put his fist on it like he owns the place. I looked at Marcus a long moment, then at Diane. Then I stood up, slow, careful, still tender across the ribs, and reached into my jacket pocket. You want to talk about lawyers, Marcus? Let's talk about lawyers. I pulled out 2 folded documents and slid the first one across the table to Diane. She looked down, and I watched the color drain out of her face before she'd even finished the first paragraph. 4 years ago, I said, you and Marcus sat me down at my own kitchen table. You were scared the lawsuit debt was going to come after your accounts. Marcus's idea, by the way, his brilliant idea. He told you it would protect your credit if that debt ever caught up to marital property. So you signed this, a debt indemnification agreement. You kept the house and your retirement as your sole separate property, and you legally locked me into 100% of the business liability and anything connected to it as mine alone. I tapped the paper. Read it again. It doesn't say debt, Diane. It says regardless of cause or timing of recovery. You didn't just protect yourself from my failure. You signed away every future claim to anything that ever came out of that case, good or bad, just to keep your hands clean of it. Your own lawyer explained it to you. Marcus signed as a witness. Marcus's face had gone pale too, but he wasn't done. Never was that boy. That doesn't matter. I'll still take you to court. On what grounds, exactly? I slid the second document across to him. Take a look at this before you finish that sentence. He looked down. A bank statement. Rosa's bank statement. $1,400, I said. That's what's in your sister's checking account right now, because 3 weeks ago she sold her grandmother's ring and took out a loan at 22% interest so I could get on an operating table. While you were billing $400 an hour to celebrate a settlement, your sister was working 6A Shifts to cover a loan payment for a job that pays her $15 an hour, helping strangers get dressed in the morning. I let that sit in the room a second. You want to talk about court, son? Go ahead. Bring every lawyer downtown. But first you go explain to a judge how you plan to claim a share of assets your mother legally waived, in writing, 4 years ago, on your own advice. Then explain to that judge where you were the night your father needed $2,800 for heart surgery, and where your sister was. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Just the window unit humming, and somewhere upstairs, a neighbor's television bleeding through the ceiling. I didn't hide this money from you, I said, and my voice finally came down soft, tired, done. I found out about the settlement sitting right here, on that pull-out couch, 19 days after surgery. It took 11 days to finalize, and the trust was set up last week. I didn't keep it quiet to be cruel, Marcus. I kept it quiet because I needed time to make sure it went to the only person who actually earned it, but I want you both to understand something. Even if I'd known sooner, even if I'd had months of warning, it wouldn't change one single thing about tonight. I looked at Diane first, then Marcus. You two walked out on this family a long time ago. You just hadn't gotten around to the paperwork yet. The trust is already finalized, I said. Irrevocable. The full 400,000 goes to Rosa. All of it. First thing Gary did was pay off that predatory loan and burn the contract. Then he cleared her rent for the next year. He's setting aside money for the nursing program she's been wanting to start but never could afford. There's a car waiting on her, though she's going to fuss at me about it. You're both officially free of my mistakes now. Isn't that what you wanted? For 9 years I heard about how I ruined this family with my failures. Well, congratulations. The failure's over. And it turns out the two of you signed yourselves right out of everything that came after it. Diane's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in longer than I could remember, my wife didn't have a single word left in her. Marcus just stood there, jaw working, staring at that bank statement like it might rearrange itself if he looked hard enough. Get out of my daughter's home, I said. Quiet, final, both of you. They left in a silence I'd never once heard out of either of them in 33 years of marriage and 32 years of raising that boy. No slammed door, no last word. Just two people walking out, realizing, in real time, that the very cleverness Marcus had always been so proud of, the legal maneuver he'd talked his own mother into, was the exact thing that had locked them both out of a fortune neither one of them would ever see a dime of. Rosa stood in the kitchen doorway after they'd gone, arms wrapped around herself, watching me. Dad. Her voice was barely a whisper. You didn't have to give me all of it. Yeah, I said. I did. I walked over and put my arm around her, careful of my ribs, and we stood there a minute in that little apartment that wouldn't be hers much longer. Not because she was losing it, but because she was finally getting more than she'd ever asked anybody for. Rings can be replaced, I remembered her telling me weeks before, sliding an envelope across a diner table. You can't. She'd been right about that. Turned out I couldn't be replaced either, not to her. And in the end, that was worth more than any number a settlement check ever put on a piece of paper. We stood there in the quiet, my daughter and me, finally safe, finally free. And somewhere across town, my son sat down that night to figure out how he was going to explain to his partners that his reputation, the one thing he'd always valued over his own father's life, wasn't going to save him from this. There wasn't a single soul left in his corner willing to bail him out. Funny how that works out.